Hello and welcome back to our knitting tutorial for the beginner square knitting pattern by myself, Heather from Arthur's Knitting Business. In this tutorial I'm going to show you the knit stitch. So in your booklet there is a page that is dedicated to this. I'm going to say it's page 3. Oh yes it is, but depending on when you're watching this it might change because I tend to change my booklets. But we are going to be completing something called square 1, which is the knit stitch, and it tells you that we're going to be using roughly 7 grams of yarn, which equates to 2.1 meters or 2.29 meters. And you might be sat thinking, well, why do I need to know that? That makes no sense to me. I will tell you why. When you buy yarn to complete a project, you're going to get this. You're going to get a yarn label, and on the yarn label it's going to give you some really valuable information, but the most valuable information is this bit here. So this tells me that the shade of colour for this yarn is called pale yellow. I might just turn it over. It's called pale yellow, and the dye lot is B236. When yarns are dyed, even if they're all supposed to be pale yellow, there will be some differentiation in between the colours because every dye lot will be different. It might not be significantly noticeable, but I'm speaking from experience here. If you knit a garment, so for example, a cardigan, which you spend months of your life knitting at the age of 15, and you use 2 different dye lots, when you then finish it and you put it on, you look in the mirror, you will see that one sleeve is completely different because you know. So you do want to use the same dye lot. If you're doing a big garment and it says that you need, say for example, 500 grams of yarn, you want to make sure that all 500 grams are from the same dye lot. And if you're not too sure how to do that, just ask the lovely people in your yarn shop. I'm sure they'll be happy to help you. This thing is also really important. So this little label will be on every yarn label. And if it's not, it's a rubbish yarn. It's not really. I just think it's madness. It tells me that this yarn is suitable for 4mm needles or UK size 8, which is what we're using. And that if I want to knit myself a square of 10 by 10 centimeters, I need to have 22 stitches and 30 rows. So it's giving me like a gauge of size, which is fantastic. And then the other thing that's really important, okay, it is important, but it's not on here. That's annoying. Cheap yarn, but that's fine. Is the weight. So the weight is important. This is telling me it's a 50 gram yarn, a 50 gram ball of yarn. Perfect. Now the reason I'm telling you here that you need 7 grams in order to knit this square is because if you have a pattern and it's telling you you need a certain amount of weight of yarn, so for example 7 grams, 500 grams, whatever it might be, you need to make sure that you get the correct amount in the correct dye lot. So that is why when you're looking at a pattern, when you feel ready and confident you want to knit from a pattern, always check the amount of yarn that is required and make sure you get the same amount in the same dye lot. It should also tell you, I don't know why it doesn't on that one, it should also tell you what it is in meters or yards. Because if it doesn't tell you that you need 500 grams of yarn, it will tell you you need, I don't know, 128 meters or whatever it might be. So it always gives you 2 different metrics to go from. But anyway, that's why I'm telling you that. So I'm just going to pop that to one side. And I'm going to show you a knit stitch. So these are knitted squares. Knitting is made by connecting a series of loops or a series of chains. So if I just put this to its side and then I stretch, hopefully you can see that this has been made using a connected series of chains. There you go. See all those little gaps? Try and do it diagonal. Oh, there you go. That's even better. Chains. Look at that. Loops. So, which is also why knitting is such a warm fabric or material when you knit it, because it helps to trap heat, which is why we always wear obviously knitted jumpers in autumn and winter. So that's what knitting actually is. It is also a very stretchy fabric as well, and it is just glorious. And that's what we're going to learn to do today. So, whoopah. We are going to cast on 25 stitches onto our size 4mm knitting needles. So I've got my 25 stitches here. Remember, if you can't remember how to cast on, if you've slept since then, go back and look at the previous tutorial, which will show you this method in detail. But for now, we're going to start knitting, if I don't get tangled up. I'm going to make sure that my ball of yarn is actually to one side, only so that my camera doesn't keep focusing on it when it shouldn't. And I'm going to scrunch my stitches up near the top of my left needle. The last thing you want to do is have them in the middle, because we're going to need to be picking them up and kicking them off, and you don't want to keep going up, down, up, down. So just keep them near the top of the needle and have your index finger there to keep them in place. So if you do accidentally scrunch them too high, your index finger will stop them from popping off. I tend to put my index finger actually against the end of the needle rather than always on top of it, but you will find that as you knit, you'll find you're in place that's actually comfortable. So I'm going to knit a couple stitches, and then I'm going to show you what we're trying to achieve using a crochet hook like I did with the casting on method. So if we just remind ourselves, we've got a stitch here, and it's made of a continuous loop of yarn, but we're going to say it's got 2 bars. It's got a bar on the left and a bar on the right. When you were casting on, you went underneath both of those bars. Now, when we're knitting, we don't go underneath both, we go underneath just one. So we're going through the stitch rather than under it, because the aim of this game is to transfer all of these stitches onto the right needle. So I said at the very, very beginning in my introduction that the needles, you've got your left needle and you've got your right needle. The left needle is the holder, it holds the stitches. The right needle does all the work. And remember from the very beginning, knitting is made from a series of chains. So we've got our chains here, and what we're doing is we're adding new chains to them and transferring them onto this right needle. So that's what knitting is. So we're going to get comfy. We're going to put our stitches near the top. I'm going to have my fingertip against the top of the needle so they don't pop off. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to separate them so you can really see what I'm up to. I'm going to bring my right needle through that top stitch. So I'm only going through 1 bar. So when you're holding it normal, not how I am, when you're holding it as normal as you're normally knitting, that's what it will look like. It will create a little X, but I'm just twisting it over so you can see it's only going through 1 bar of yarn. So we've gone through the stitch, not under it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the yarn end, I'm going to wrap it down around my needle going from front to back. I'm going to put my fingertip at the top of the needle, and I've now got to bring this yarn underneath that bar or underneath that stitch. That's what I need to achieve, and that will create a new stitch. So fingertip at the top, bring it down, push it under. There we go. So I've now got a new stitch. What I'm not going to do is put it onto my left needle, because remember we are transferring these stitches onto this, but I can't keep this one either. If I keep this one, it means that I'll end up with 26 stitches rather than 25. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick the old stitch off the left needle, and this is what is going to create our chain. This is what's going to create our knitting look. So you can see, we've got our old stitch underneath with our new stitch, come here you stitch, come here, with our new stitch on the top, and that is creating our chain. So there we go, that's knitting. Put that back on, tighten it. So let's do that again. We're going to put the needle through the stitch, so we've only got 1 bar. We're going through the stitch, not under it. We're going to take our yarn, we're going to wrap it around from back to front, and we're going to use our finger to hold onto the top of our needle. I've also got my left index finger holding onto the needles on my stitches on my left needle. Don't forget about those, they're pesky, they will run off if you don't hold onto them. And then we're going to bring that right needle down. And I'm kind of using my index finger to kind of push the needle down and through. There we go. So I've got my new stitch there, so I can kick my old one off, and that will create another stitch. And we just keep going in that, oh, beg your pardon, we keep going in that motion. Kick the old, like, so I kicked, there you go, see, look, it gets I can't say the word, autonomous. So I kick the old one off pretty much instantly. So that's my new stitch, kick the old one off. Now, if you are sat there and you're thinking, I don't understand what you're trying to achieve, don't panic. I'm going to show you using my good old trusty crochet hook. So I'm just going to put the needle down, and I'm really putting it out of the way. Here we've got our stitch. I'm going to place the crochet hook through that stitch, which is not as easy when it's, there you go. So it's through that stitch, look. I'm going to take my yarn, sorry, fiddly little job. Take my yarn and wrap it around the crochet hook. Now I want you to watch the hook, and I want you to watch this yarn to see where it goes. I'm just going to try and separate it as much as I can, because this is what we are trying to achieve. Look, it's going underneath that bar to create our brand new slip stitch. But instead of hooking it onto the needle, we kick the old one off. Okay, so hopefully that clarified a couple things, if there's anybody still scratching their head. And if you're still scratching your head like, I don't get it, I don't understand, that's fine. That is absolutely fine. The knitting is a skill. It's like anything, it takes time. Like, I'm not being funny. Put a load of numbers in front of me and my mind looks at it and goes, nope. I can do math, but I have to really think about it, and which I know sounds so silly, but I really do. So please don't be, if you can't get it straight away, that is perfectly normal. Don't be disheartened. You've just got to keep going. You've got to persevere, because the end result of whatever it is that you make is going to be worth it. Not just because you end up with something that's absolutely beautiful and stunning, but also, don't forget, the bragging rights. The bragging rights are what make it even more worth it. Anyway, persevering. So I'm going to keep knitting my 25 stitches. So I've done 2, 4, 5. I've now got 20 left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit the remaining 25, and I'm going to go at this very slow pace. So you can watch as you're knitting, if you need to look up to just see what you're up to, or remind yourself of how to do something, it is here for you. If you're not sure, you can also rewind and go back to some of the previous stages. I could mute the video here, or I could chat to you. What could I tell you? It's a sunny Oxfordshire day today. Oh, you could mute it. Yeah, if you don't want to listen to me, you can just mute it. It's a sunny day here in Oxfordshire. I'm home alone with my wonderful Otto dog, who is my gorgeous little Dachshund. He might pop up in a video, but if you ever hear any clacking like that, will be him running across my kitchen floor, because I'm currently at my little, I call it the home haberdashery, named by my husband, but it's essentially just my dining table. But yeah, it's just covered in yarn. It has been bombarded. Ooh, I also live near an RAF base, so if you can hear the plane in the background, that is why. Now, for anybody who's looking up, you may notice I've stopped doing something. What have I stopped doing? I wonder if anybody's clocked it. I'll tell you in a second, because I'm at the end of my row. Perfect. Now, I'm sure you already know this, but if at any point you're ever getting a bit overwhelmed and you're just, I need a minute, pause, come back. You have access to these videos forever. They're not going away anytime soon. And if for whatever reason the platform ever changes, I will let you know, and you will be sent a copy of everything. So please don't think you've got to rush and get this done within the next hour or whatever time. So here we go. We now have our first row that has been knit. And if I just use my scissors, because they have a lovely point. These V shapes here, these are our knit stitches. These represent each stitch on our needle. So they look like V's. Now we're going to be doing the same stitch over and over again. So eventually our V's are going to turn into little bumps, little horizontal bars. Now knitting for every row, so for rows 1, 2, 3, etc., this creates something called a garter stitch, and this is where you have these horizontal lines on either side of your knit. So it's known as a garter stitch. And you can count them by counting the top bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, blah, 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 to see how many rows you have created. Because we're doing even squares, what I suggest you do is to try and make a square that is the same size in all of your stitches that eventually we're going to cover. Whilst it's on the needles, if you just bring it from corner, hopefully to corner, if you then have a nice matched up edge, it means it is a square. So this is a rectangle because I overshot it. However, I think this one is more square-like. Not bad at all. So I only overshot it by about 1. But that's what I'd recommend you do to make sure that you get even squares as a beginner. Just as a beginner, it's just for this pattern. I can't stress that. When you're knitting a cardigan or a jumper, this is not how you measure things. But it's just while you're getting the hang of things, it's just an easier way to make sure you're making a neat square so that you can eventually combine them with others. But anyway, let's get back to knitting, shall we? I've knit one row, I'm going to knit another. This time, however, I will mute the video so you don't have to listen to me parroting on. So I'm just going to knit another row using the knit stitch. And I'm going to go at a nice slow pace so that if you need to look up to see a little reminder, oh, you can see it. But also I didn't, oh, sorry, I went off focus. I didn't tell you the thing I stopped doing. I stopped putting my finger at the top of my needle when I was bringing the stitch through. I don't know if anybody noticed that. I'll tell you what I did instead, or what I do instead. I hold onto the yarn tail of the yarn. So as I'm pulling it round, I'm still holding it, and I'm holding it against my needle so that I can then pull it or push it under. That's just what I do automatically. I don't even think about it. My left needle doesn't move. I'm moving the right needle only. But by holding onto that yarn, I'm anchoring it so that my stitches on the right needle can't just pop off. There you go. So I'm going to knit the remainder of my row, and I'll get back to you soon. Okie dokie. There is my second knit row. So again, I know it's my second knit row by counting the top bars. So 1 and, oh, use my scissors. Beg your pardon, sorry, I keep going out of focus. I do apologise. So by counting the top bars, so I've got 1 top bar, and then directly under it, I've got another bar, so that's 2. That's 2 rows. So 1 and 2. And it's always, you always want to count the top bar. And what you don't want to do is when you are counting those rows with garter stitch, this is just garter stitch, so this is just knit stitch continuously. You don't want to count diagonally, because this is the top of each stitch, this is the bottom of each stitch. So it's essentially one thing. So that's why you don't want to go 1, 2, 3. Oh, I've done three rows. No, you haven't. You've done 2. You always count the top bar and then the bar that is directly under it. So there'll be parallel little lines. But there you go. So that is the knit stitch. I will leave you there to keep going. Obviously you can rewind the videos, rewatch as many times as you like. The next video is going to show you how to cast off. So when you've knit as much or as little as you want, the next video is going to show you how to then take those stitches off. It's called casting off, and you create yourself a nice little neat edge as well. Okie dokie. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it helpful, and as always, happy knitting.